Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Adult Child of Dysfunction. Today, we have with us Shavaun Scott. She's a psychotherapist and author from Portland, Oregon. She specializes in trauma recovery and has written 4 books. Her most recent book is Nightbird, a memoir about her journey after the revenge suicide of her husband. So, welcome, Shavaun.
Thank you. So good to see you.
Yes, glad to have you here. So we're talking a little bit before this, before we even got on, and we were talking about just trauma in general. And it really made me think because I was like, we've never actually talked about what constitute trauma because
Mhm.
trauma recovery, you hear this word and you get kind of intimidated, like that's not
Mhm.
me or I can't be part of
Mhm.
that. So do you mind just talking kind of a little bit about refreshing what we just talked about for the audience?
Yeah, a lot of people feel like trauma or abuse has to be being hit, um, being tormented in some way. But I think everybody grows up at least with moments where their needs were not optimally met. And that's just part of the normal human experience. And it doesn't mean we're all broken. But we've all got wounds, and I think those wounds often show up in our self-esteem, in our difficulty setting boundaries. And those are things that come up in therapy for women all the time, for men too. But I think particularly for women, we struggle with setting boundaries because so often we're taught as kids that our needs don't matter. And that's something that most people have experienced to some degree, and a lot of people experienced it a lot. But because of the family they grew up in, it was normalized and they didn't understand that they had the right to value themselves.
Absolutely. And I know, like you said, we were talking about the big T, little t trauma. It doesn't matter. It
It
doesn't matter
doesn't
how
matter.
little it was, how big it was. If it changes the way you look at the world, or like you said, your self esteem, it's
Yes,
literally going to follow you into adulthood and it's going to change the way you show up in the world.
100%. That's exactly it. And whether people want to use the word trauma or not, sometimes they're more comfortable with the word wounding or just the way that their parents weren't there for them, the way that they weren't nurtured at times when they hurt. And those things affect us and they're things that we carry. And in that way, I think everybody's got some wounds.
Absolutely. So, in just looking like, oh, I know I always say to my clients, because they say, oh, I got this. I took care of this. I did this and I got this. I always try to come up with questions that you would ask yourself. And I remember there was a psychologist one time, and I remember her saying, I don't remember her name. I really need to get it. But she said, picture your favorite ice cream and how does that make you feel?
Mhm.
Right. And it's like warm and fuzzy, or, your
Mhm.
favorite food. It makes you feel good. And
Mhm.
then say to yourself something like, I deserve all good things,
Mhm.
and then sit with that.
Mhm.
How does that make you feel? And I say, if you get a clench in your jaw or a little tightness in your back or a little gut punch in your belly, maybe it would be worth exploring.
Very much, very much. Because if you grow up in a home where lack of attunement, people who just weren't really present for you, or people that were unkind, in a myriad ways, you normalize that feeling bad is just part of what life is all about.
Mhm.
And being self-critical, we can internalize those critical voices. They sort of go on and live in our head, and it becomes the way we talk to ourselves. And that has a lot to do with depression and anxiety. And, we know with all the research going on in behavioral sciences, we've got more depression and anxiety now than we've probably ever had.
Absolutely. And it is actually saddening. I was reading an article the other day and they were talking about the rate of suicides in like 9 to 13 year olds.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I can't even. I mean, I had a rough life,
Yeah.
and I wasn't 13 considering taking my own life,
Right.
and it's just absolutely amazing. And it just seems like if you can just let people know, like, what is your biggest advice? Like, just talk, like getting people to be able to lash out, or not lash out, but just voice their fears.
Yeah, I think one of the most healing things we can do is telling our story honestly to somebody who cares about us. And a therapist or a coach is wonderful, but it can also be the right kind of friend or friend group, you know. It's one of the things in writing my memoir that has been so healing in my life was going to memoir writing groups where people were supportive, where people wanted to hear each other's stories. And I think just by talking about the story, and of course in memoir, you're writing about your early life and the lessons you learned growing up and trying to connect all the dots. And I think for everybody, that kind of support, because really healing of the nervous system happens from connection and from having those kind of nurturing experiences with people who love us and care about us. And for people who did not experience that growing up, it's one of the most important steps in healing is being able to talk and be honest and open up.
Wow. That's yeah, it's so true. So so true. Now you mentioned your memoir and your last book, and I want you to talk about that a little bit because that is one where I mean you talk when I hear adult child of dysfunction, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this story." Like I haven't read it obviously, but I want to read it and talk a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, I had a very interesting life, a very interesting childhood with a lot of harsh criticism, very strict parenting, and I was raised in a very rigid, punitive religious faith. And so I had a lot of strange experiences are in the book. It's funny at times and shocking at times and scary at times. I guarantee it's not boring, as my life has never had a boring day in it. But I grew up, I married, I actually met my first husband when I was 15 years old in a fundamentalist church. And so the book kind of goes through why I married at 16 and had three babies, boom, 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 and then went into therapy in my 20s and figured out, okay, I really went down the wrong path here, made some mistakes, and ended up going to college after I had three children, but had a lot of therapy and was looking at my past and my growth. But in my 20s, I still didn't know how to set boundaries because I had been raised in a home where I was taught to put my needs last. And so I married an abusive man. And he did not punch me, but he put holes in walls, screamed in my face, at one point put his hands around my neck, and was a terrible person. But I was in love with the fantasy of who I thought he would become because there were times he was very, very good. And I had a long marriage with him, and the book goes through. It's not all about him, but it's more about my personal growth throughout these years because I was also working as a therapist in a women's shelter program during those years, which there's a lot of irony there that I was able to help other people, but still white knuckle through my own personal life because I'm strong and because I had a trauma bond with him. So the book opens with me finding his body after he's killed himself. And he killed himself on the day that I was fed up and told him I was getting a divorce. And so I explore in the book the different types of suicide because we often think that suicide is about depression, and about half the time it is. But there are several other subtypes of suicide, and one is known as revenge suicide. And this is usually a man, and it's usually at the time that a woman is leaving the relationship or has just left the relationship. And it's the final expression of rage, power, control, and vengeance. And it's really designed to leave permanent, lasting damage on that woman that he's so enraged at. So that's sort of the story, a quick overview of the book. And I hope that there are lots of life lessons about the mistakes that I made in it.
Well, and just probably from one, starting from the fact that when you grow up in that kind of control and that kind of not being able to have boundaries and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you marry the wrong person usually for the wrong reasons.
The
You
wrong person. Yeah,
it's inevitable. I just feel like, if you grow up with narcissistic parents, there's a good chance you're going to end up with a narcissist, whether
100%.
whether I mean, I don't know, you're more experienced at this than me, but it seems like it's comfortable. One, your brain likes
Mhm.
familiarity. You know
Mhm.
how to deal with that. Two,
Mhm.
you don't see anything wrong with it, honestly.
Right. Right.
Like,
Yeah, because you've normalized mistreatment. And so you don't recognize that you're being hurt because, I mean, it hurts and you may get very depressed and you may cry a lot, but that's like home. And so how is that any different? And you don't have that inner radar to go, okay, I deserve to be treated with compassion and kindness and respect. And a relationship should feel comforting. It should be our safe place. But when we didn't grow up with that, we don't recognize it when we're adults.
and we also don't recognize just the fact of listening to your instinct. You're in, you
Exactly.
know, when you get that gut instinct, like, oh, this doesn't feel right, there's a good chance it probably isn't. But we
Hmm.
were always told, just suck it up, get over
Hmm.
it, do
Hmm.
this, what you're told.
Be
And
strong.
yeah, be strong, right?
Hmm.
That's crazy. So yeah, the book was so how did you get just I'm just gonna how did you get through that? How did you get through, I guess, was it survivor's guilt or
I truly had such extreme grief and it was complicated grief because I completely bought into, I have a very sensitive, empathic heart, and his whole message was, look what you did to me.
Mhm.
And I was in such a state of complete shock for weeks after finding his body because it was staged in a really horrific way, so that I would come home at night and walk in on this horror movie scene. I decompensated and I wasn't able to take care of myself. And so I describe the whole book is not about the trauma, but I do go into the reaction in my body, in my mind, how I lost my ability to think clearly. I became very non-rational. I wasn't sleeping for weeks. I lost 15 pounds in a month. So it was the most incredibly intense trauma response that certainly I've ever had in my life. I hope I don't have another one like it.
right,
But how I got through it was I had incredible friends, and fortunately, two people stepped forward and just went above and beyond. They were an older couple I was very close to, husband and wife, and they were both psychologists. And because I really couldn't take care of myself, they took me into their home. I stayed with them for 3 weeks, and they basically created this nurturing, healing, 24/7 little program just to be present with me and care for me. And I did have to get psychiatric care, and I had really good psychiatric care. And I came back and I bounced back, and I think I'm more resilient now than ever. Very hard way to learn some life lessons, but it was really those heart to heart connections and then rediscovering myself one little step at a time and being able to get clear that I never had the power to fix that man. I didn't cause his problems. I couldn't cure his problems. And I gave him far too many years of my life in love with this fantasy. And he had a path and he chose his path. And so, with the help of good therapy and my friends, I was able to see reality, which was he made choices here. And I did not owe him my life and basically living with an abusive personality. That was not my destiny. And I didn't owe him that. And so I just needed that therapy, that support to get really clear on the boundary between his choice and, oh, look what you made me do, which I'm not that powerful. If I were that powerful, I would have fixed him, right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine. We had a foster sister that lived when I was younger that my mom and dad took in. And don't ask me why, because they had the worst toxic relationship you can ever imagine. Why they would bring another child into the mix, I don't even understand. But she had some troubled past from that's why she was in the foster system.
Yeah.
And she was in high school. And I remember she was stealing from my father. And my father said, steal from me again and you're gone. And he was not kidding. And she stole from him again. And he said, that's it. You have till the weekend, find a place, get out. And she was 17 and he came home and she had killed herself.
Yeah. Yeah.
We never spoke that girl's name again. And I
Wow.
can't even imagine. I mean, my father died an alcoholic. I can't even imagine the guilt or what he went through
Yeah.
to never have dealt with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
It
know,
would certainly contribute to somebody drinking a lot.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, and he was already drinking, so just to add that onto his plate of mess and demons he had to deal with. But
Hmm.
I remember when I got in, I wasn't in Al-Anon or Alateen. I had gone to Alateen, had a bad experience, but I wasn't in Al-Anon. I wasn't in ACA. I wasn't in anything at that time. But like you brought up that, you can't control it. You
Hmm.
didn't cause it. You can't
Hmm.
control it. You can't cure it and you cannot
Exactly.
control it. So you
Exactly.
need to step aside. But there's also the human aspect of it.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
very easy to say,
It's easy
especially
to say, but when you grow up in a family where everybody, you feel the weight of the parental baggage. You feel like if I'm perfect, if I'm really good, if I try really hard, if I keep the peace in the home by not causing any trouble, by not having boundaries, you feel like you're the one in control.
right.
And it's false training. It's like I've got to be calm to keep mom calm. I can't cry because mom's going to get angry. Yeah, it's so many things that we don't know we carry going into adulthood because it really does program our way of thinking and perceiving and being in the world. And sometimes it's subtle.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's with everything. It's with relation. I tell people, and they're like, "Oh, well, you just picked the wrong guys." I'm like, "No, I also have trouble in leadership roles. I also am afraid of authority. I also
Yeah,
X and A and B and C, and I'm like, the
exactly.
list goes on and on and on." And I think, for me, it really took getting ready to have a child and knowing that I had to fix me. I wasn't broken, but in my mind, I was broken.
Right,
So I
right.
had to fix me in order to be okay enough to be a parent.
Yeah, yeah. And really, you weren't broken, you had wounds.
Hmm.
And you had wounds for very logical reasons. It wasn't because you were crazy. It's like this is the way you were brought up and you had wounding. And I think we all are somewhere in the process of trying to heal those wounds. Some people do it very consciously and it goes fairly quickly. And other people they're trying maybe in ways that don't work very well. Maybe they're doing drugs and alcohol because they want to heal and they want to not hurt, but they don't know how to do it. They need some guidance. And other people are trying to do it through I have a friend who just is so into outdoors activities and horseback riding, and she raises llamas and she lives on a farm. And I look at her healing journey, and she doesn't really do therapy, but she does it through these wonderful activities and her connection with nature and animals. And I think we're all trying, and some of the ways are effective and some of the ways are not effective.
And that's why I tell people, I'm like, people are like, well, what did you try? I'm like, everything.
Everything.
I threw
Hmm.
every piece of spaghetti at the wall and one would stick.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, that's good. Let's
Hmm.
go with that one. And that
Hmm.
one would work for a little bit until God peeled back another layer and I got to deal with another layer of my ever so layered personality.
Yeah.
But I think it's, that's why I tell people try everything. Don't
Yes.
discount anything, as long as when you're in it are with someone that makes you feel safe. That's my
Yes.
biggest thing. If
Safety is everything. Yeah.
Yes, because that's a lot of why we show up the way we do is because we don't feel safe in our body and we're like bouncing
Mhm.
back, reverting back to that 5 year old. It's like I was telling someone that was afraid to come on the podcast, and it was so funny. And she's like, well, I don't understand why I'm afraid. I'm like, because your body feels the same standing in a boardroom in front of all these people getting ready to tell a speech as you did when you were standing naked in the living room getting ready to get your butt whooped.
Exactly.
Your body does
Exactly.
not know the difference.
Yeah, the nervous system is going into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and it's automatic. And even when we know, well, I shouldn't be feeling this, it's in your nervous system. You're wired. Yeah.
Yeah, and I say that I'm sure that's a lot of what you do with your people is I'm like you can't think yourself out of anxiety or
Right.
depression.
Right.
You
Right.
you know I tell people well, again, I'm not an expert, but I'm like it's if you feeling it in your body, it's in there. Once it's in
Yeah.
there, it's got to get out somehow.
Yeah.
And I know for some people it's really hard. I remember the first time I went to a therapist and they said to me, well, how did that make you feel? And I was like, feel.
Feel exactly.
Like,
I said the same thing.
yeah, like what
Yeah.
exactly does that mean?
What
Could
does
you be
that
a little,
mean?
yeah, could you be a
Uh-huh.
little more specific?
Uh-huh.
And she's like, well, most people that would have made them really angry. And I'm like, no, I don't really get angry.
Mm-hmm.
Sad? She's like, sad? Oh, no, I don't really get sad.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's everybody deals with their thing. But what would be your suggestion? I mean, I could probably go on all day, but if you know now you're listening to this and you're like, wow, maybe I do have some stuff to unpack,
Mm-hmm.
where might be a good starting point?
Um, so many things. People really enjoy, as you're doing, podcasts, listening to podcasts, gaining some awareness, reading books. If you just put trauma into Amazon, you're going to find all kinds of things. But I think just exploring the topic, the possibility that maybe I do carry wounds, and maybe that does show up in migraine headaches or back pain, because the mind-body connection is real. And sometimes there are psychological wounds, wounds of the heart that are affecting the body. And so I think just being open, doing some exploring, reading, and then finding that safe person, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a best friend who's not going to be judgmental and write off your emotions, the things that you share. But I think we all need to create a safe place where we can tell the story, where we can talk about things and start to notice what the feelings are. And another thing that has been really healing for me physically is dance. And I talk about that in the book, how I discovered an African dance group one day accidentally. And it just freed my nervous system up. And I felt so strong and it was so physical. So whether you get out in nature, whether you enjoy your pets, finding these other ways that nurture your soul and that make you feel good. I have a little dog and I walk every day. We live in a forest every day. I walk through the forest and, paying attention to my breathing and movement. It's like this multifaceted approach that I think all these things we do, getting enough sleep.
Mhm.
Is super important, not working ourselves to death, not self-sacrificing all the time. And I think so many of us who grew up in dysfunctional families were used to self-sacrifice, and we see it as noble. And certainly my religious faith taught me that it was noble to give, 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 and never take care of myself. I didn't even know what that meant. And so it's a lot to learn, but I think just having that mind to be open that, this may be something I could do some reading about or listen to some podcasts and learn more about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's really how I started my podcast, was because I was like, my word isn't the end all go all. Like there's a million people out there talking about the same thing. And
Hmm.
also, tell your story. Tell it to
Yes.
someone you trust. Write it down. Journal. I mean,
Yes.
journaling is huge.
Huge.
And I think that's, it's just getting it out. It's releasing. Every time you write or you talk into your recorder while you're walking through the woods or something and tell a story, you're getting it out of your body. And
Yes.
I it's I think now we're in a good age where doctors and therapists and everybody is starting to really look at things and really look back at the childhood. When I went to the doctor at 18 years old and I was vomiting blood and had bleeding ulcers, they never asked me about my family life.
Wow.
Never. They
That's
never even
glaring.
said, and I was like, my mother had just died of cirrhosis at 42. Like,
Wow.
I'm like, never. And now I'm the first one to say, when I stress out, my stomach hurts. When you know, I, when I'm just a little tense or I know I got some big deadline coming up, my knees hurt. Like it's all
It's
physical.
real.
It's
It's
all, and
real.
it's
Hmm.
real.
Hmm.
So like you said, the mind body connection, you have to find the missing, or I guess the cohesive unit to
Yes.
just work on it all.
Work on all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I tell people, you got the body, mind, and the spirit. You can't fix the body if the mind's wrong, because it's just going to go
Yep.
right back. You can't fix the
100%.
spiritual part about it if you're not taking care of your body. Like
Yep.
it all goes together.
It sure does.
But I love that you just, like just explore, just be
Yes.
curious, and be curious with no judgment.
Yeah.
Because you talked about before, your inner critic. I mean, that is the person that sits on your shoulder and you say something and it just, we're so hard on ourselves. And it's going to happen because when you go through a growing stage, you do have to self-reflect a little bit. You do
Hmm.
have to take some responsibility for the fact that you are here right now. Who is it? Benjamin Franklin said, with awareness comes great responsibility.
Yes.
It's so, but give yourself grace. I tell
Yes.
people, before you were X amount of years old, you had no control over
No,
anything.
no.
And even up until you didn't know what you didn't know. But
Right.
once you know, the past is, yes, it's the past, but you just know, it's there. It's not going away. But
Right.
it's time to move forward gracefully with yourself, loving yourself, really.
100%, 100%. And it's that long process because we're rewiring the brain. We're rebuilding new neural pathways, and we have to practice these new skills and new ways of perceiving and being. And I'm still working on it. I'm 66 years old and I'm going to be in progress forever. But I tell you, I'm way better than I was 30 years ago, way better than I was 20 years ago. It's like I may not see huge progress day to day, but if I go back a few years, I can go, whoa, I've really grown a lot. I'm doing so much better. My nervous system is more regulated. I feel more joy. I set boundaries, much more ease. It's,
Absolutely. And the people involved in your life are seeing it too, whether you know it or not.
yeah,
People that, like the moms that are like, oh my gosh, they're hearing this. And I know they're out there. I know they're going, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mother. I'm blah, blah, blah. No, don't do that. Just start
right,
walking forward because your children
right.
see your healing growth. They see that.
100%,
And when you heal yourself, you heal every generation after you, without a doubt.
100%. Yes.
So, well, this has been super fun. If people want to come work with you, come find out more about what you got, read your books. I'm going to put links to the books in the show notes, but what is the best place for them to come find you?
Probably through my website, which is just my name.com. So it's SHAVAUNSCOTT.com. And I've got contact information on there and info on all the books and articles and videos and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to read your book because after I read that, I was like, oh, I didn't ever even think. So I'm wondering if, like my foster sister, if that was kind of a revenge. I don't know if
Very,
that's what she was thinking when she did that, or it was just despair at its finest.
yeah, yeah, and it's hard to know for sure, but it certainly can go either way. And I have a lot of the book is kind of a combination of my personal story, but a lot of this information about the different kinds of suicides, so people can start to make sense of it because we always assume it's depression, but that's only half of the suicides are depression, and the other half are other things.
Right. Yeah, I had my son's friend, this kind of off topic, but my son's friend had a brother, a little brother. He was in high school or not very old. And I guess he had this little girlfriend and he saw her walking down the street with another boy, even though it was just a friend. He went home and hung himself. No
Hmm.
signs of depression,
Hmm.
no anything, just spread.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's because of media and because they just kind of glorify it or they
Yeah,
just play it down, one or the
yeah,
other. And it's
yeah.
just like, but a snap decision like that, and his life is over.
Horrible, just
And
horrible.
yeah, and we
So many
all,
tragedies.
so many, 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 many. So this has been, oh my gosh. So thank you so much. And the audience is going to love what you had to say. Now, I'm not going to let you off the hook yet. Can you leave them with one more like words of wisdom from Shavaun Scott or something they can take with them today?
Um, Always notice. I think notice would be my one word of wisdom. Pay attention and just notice your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, your relationship health, and pause and notice. And just, when you notice things about yourself, then you're in a position to take action. But until you notice, you don't know what to do.
Absolutely. Well, well said. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you.
Yes, you're very welcome. For everybody else out there listening, you heard it. You heard it from Shavaun Scott. Just take action, notice, be aware, And I'm just going to add in there and love yourself. Love yourself like you are your own best friend for the rest of your life. So thank you. And you all have a blessed day.